Welcome very much to Conversations, where we've got two gentlemen here tonight to talk about a phenomenon, a growing phenomenon in this country, in a generic sense, being group homes that are developing on various fronts. And if I may, on my far left, I have the distinct personal honor of being able to welcome to the program my son, that being David Channer, and he's taken his degree in biology, if I may say so, at the University of California, but he has been for the last few months working as a staff resident, or helping out, as it were, like at a family house, which is a group home, the family house of the family of Woodstock Incorporated. And David, my son, welcome very, very much to Conversation.
Thank you. Pleasure.
And my immediate left is Ray Stridiron, and Ray Stridiron is project director of the advocacy program at Fountain House, which is a model
psychiatric rehabilitation center.
Psychiatric rehabilitation center, and a pioneer in terms of group home activity and helping out some of the people. And Ray, welcome very, very much to
Thank you very much, Al.
Maybe you could pick it up. You've been at this for a long time, Ray, and so forth. Maybe you pick it up with, because Fountain House itself, I think, is a model, and it got started from something called
it's called the WANA Society, which is an acronym for WANA, which stands for We Are Not Alone.
Yeah. And
basically it was started by a group of 10 or so ex-mental patients from Rockland State Hospital who basically banded together in an attempt to try to find their way, and basically to band together against issues like loneliness and finding jobs and situations like that. So one of the things that was foremost in their minds was finding a home and finding a permanent place that they could be, that they could call their own.
This goes way back in the 40s.
Oh, yeah.
When there wasn't anything really being done other than our state institutions.
That's right. And unfortunately, it was very difficult during those times for people to get discharged unless they had a sponsor on the outside that would basically vouch for them or say that they would get work within a certain period of time. And without that, they would just have to stay in the mental institution.
Yeah, in many ways, they were worse off than the prisoners that had committed felonies in our prisons.
Oh, that's very definitely true. Matter of fact, along that same line, I talked to some of my colleagues who have not suffered from mental illness and that had been incarcerated in jails. And many of them mentioned the fact that some of the conditions were worse for mental people who had been in hospitals because of the fact, for example, if you were an inmate, a person that was incarcerated for a criminal act, you knew when you were going to be discharged,
right,
or when you were going to get out.
Right.
You knew what was going to happen. You knew what the rules of the game were.
You had a fortune society, maybe, that might help you out, too.
Well, they tried their best, and that was true. There were some advocates out there.
Right, there were some advocates
that could help a person out, and they were really right up front with it. There were people who felt that they had to do their thing kind of behind the scenes to be helpful to this population of people. But certainly in terms of housing, people first started renting apartments and so on and so forth. And those people who had a little means were able to do it, and some people who didn't have means or jobs weren't able to do it. So what happened was we got this director for Fountain House that basically would lease the apartment and sublet the apartment to the two individuals, and the person would start paying rent from the first month rent, not having to pay security or anything like that.
Right.
Which was a great help.
Sure, just help them over that initial hurdle and that sort of thing. Right. And now Fountain House, that was perhaps in a certain sense the first.
Oh yeah.
And the model. And now it's a model for an institution in and of itself and other sister institutions which are growing, I don't know, almost exponentially in this country and even internationally. These places are beginning to emerge.
Very true. Those individual apartments grew into residences where there were ability to house many people that wanted to live with each other and get the support of another group of people, or get a support of a staff worker around, or they would feel that it felt kind of funny to be away from home, or maybe it felt funny not to have the support of the hospital. So they might band together and live in these very nice residences, I might add. They're very elegant, very well kept. They're not dumps, SRO rows where the mental patients are generally relegated to. And we are one of a system now of 240 clubhouses across the country and internationally, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, South Africa, many other places throughout the world that are becoming interested in this type of model.
Yeah.
I was talking to a group of 20 Japanese people recently who are very interested in joining in this effort. So it's a very popular model for those people who want to take the time and have an interest in the patient or the client or the resident or the member, as we call them, people who inhabit housing facilities.
Or a consumer of of services, as they are.
Okay, that's a term that basically is being coined by many advocate groups around the country, and particularly in New York City and in New York State, that basically is trying to identify a group of people who are, as consumers are, people who consume and contribute to the economics of the country or the city or whatever. Mental health consumers provide jobs, provide
yeah. Okay. Go on. Yeah.
Provide all kinds of jobs and livelihoods for psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, nurses, a whole delivery system of people who are dependent upon the consumer for their livelihood. Unfortunately, the weird thing about it is that in many quarters, people try to make the consumer dependent upon the system for their nourishment. But if people were really to investigate the system, they would realize that the system really should be much more better to the consumer, because without them, they wouldn't have a means of raising their children, of having a home, of driving very nice cars, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and they've been growing particularly too now, since after Thomas Szasz and some of the other people who they began to deinstitutionalize, as it were. Many of the people were in the mental institutions, and there was not a very good acceptance within many of the societies where there should have been some place for those people to go. And I'm afraid many of them landed on the streets of the cities of the country, and it created a great problem. That Fountain House addresses, and now it's being recognized as more and more of those. There are other problems that exist within society, and that's David has come in, and David is working in what is like a group home upstate in Rosendale.
It's a temporary facility. Most of the kids who are coming, we work with 12 to 17-year-olds, and most of them are coming through our place looking for a longer-term placement or looking for a foster home or coming out of a jail. Looking to get reassimilated back into the community. So we're sort of a holding pen and a place where we can keep them sheltered and safe and also work their cases, try to get them what they need.
Yeah. And
so,
it's, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Just as opposed to a long-term group home, we're a
crisis
case
place.
accelerator. We're a crisis shelter.
And you're
we like to call it a crisis-free shelter.
Yeah, and you're dealing with kids in what, 12 to 16-year-old
12 to
age
17,
group?
yeah.
And many of them are from families that are broken up, or that there's difficulty, or they've been abandoned or thrown out or abused or something like that. So that a lot of these children that are really children, that are some of the most vulnerable people within our society, if they can't go back into the family as normally has been the nurturing agency.
Right.
And that's a problem up there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a problem everywhere. In New York State, 16 to 21-year-olds are the fastest growing homeless population. The average age of a homeless person in New York State is 9.
God,
this
really
is taking into account single mothers with children living in SROs, or not all of them. Not homeless doesn't necessarily mean without a roof over their head.
Yeah.
But it might mean that they're in some kind of a housing facility.
Yeah,
and they have no means.
And the words was it Thomas Wolfe who said, "And you cannot go home again because the conditions at home are so unstable." That, or perhaps it's untenable, maybe economically or for whatever reason, that these group homes, and then there are long-term group homes in addition to crisis such as where you are, but that they're growing in almost mushroom proportions all over the country as the society, in a certain sense, the traditional society, with its nurturing agencies for so many people, begin to crumble.
Yes, there's a trend actually with the population that I'm working with, since they're still minors, the trend now is pushing toward actually maintaining them in the home, working on preventative care and maintaining them in the home and working on addressing the problems within the family.
Within the traditional family that they had felt they had to be brought from, or were brought from, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we'll get kids coming through who just need a temporary respite from a home.
Right.
If they've got an abusive parent or a neglectful parent, or if there's just fighting and there's tension and they just need a break.
Yeah.
Sometimes the kids are the abusive parts of the puzzle, and
Well.
so the parents need a break. So it goes, it's complicated.
Yeah.
So what can happen in cases like that is that family work is done, where they will, counseling will be given to the whole family as a group. They'll come into while the kids are with us. The family will be brought in for family sessions and try to help them understand what is causing this dynamic that continues to trouble the family.
Yeah.
For another thing that's going on right now is there's a lot of programs that are called friendly guerrilla programs, where if there's trouble with a kid in the home, rather than place that child in a group home or something like that, which can residential treatment facilities, I think, cost the state or state and federal governments $35,000 to $135,000 a year for a child.
Yeah.
And the group home, I think, runs between, forgetting now, $50,000 to $70,000 a year, or something like that. A friendly guerrilla would be a person who's hired at about $15,000, $16,000 a year, and would basically be like a big brother or a big sister to take this kid places, be with that kid for however many hours a day while he's not in school or asleep, and in that way alleviate the problems at home and help get through whatever the crisis going on is.
Yeah, and help create a sense of nurturing, or a sense of family, in a certain sense.
Right.
The institution you belong to is called Family of Woodstock, Inc., I think, if I'm not mistaken, and then Family House is what you're called. But it is this sense of nurturing that the traditional systems and the traditional extended families and things that we've lived with historically in our historical development are not working adequately, nor, I understand, are they working adequately in Europe and other parts of the Western world. They're beginning the traditional nurturing agencies and are falling apart. And this is a response to that, in a sense, I guess, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
And it's growing very, very rapidly now.
Yeah, I don't know what the statistics are with the growth of group homes, but it's tremendous.
Well, I know certainly in terms of Fountain House, for example, it recognizes that a person's life is transitional, that it may not be in the same place today and forever. And so a person will have an opportunity to have choices. There are different kinds of housing type situations, from supervised, from semi-supervised, to independent, to apartments, to totally independent apartments, and this gives people choices. For example, people that are discharged from hospitals are generally given one choice, a halfway house. You go from the hospital to the halfway house, and so on and so forth. Maybe a person may need less restriction than that. Maybe a person may need more protection than that. But this kind of stance doesn't require that. But also within that, there's a very strange kind of dynamic also, that membership for a Fountain House member is lifetime. That doesn't mean that we've got you for a lifetime, but it means that basically the Fountain House program has a commitment to you for a lifetime, or however it takes, in order to get you where you want to go.
Again, that nurturing context within which, what's the word, vulnerable people would be able to, be nurtured and brought into a better relationship with their own internal consciousness and the outer overall world. And in both cases, the people who have mental problems or mental difficulties or difficulties in adjusting to the world as it is, evolving and developing sociologically and so forth, both of these programs are growing so very rapidly. If I may, Senator Moynihan, just recently, he sort of backed away from it, but he said that the number of children that are being born outside of a family structure that is viable, or as they would see it that way, single-parent families, that is going up to where it's within a matter of less than a decade, it will be something on the order of 50% of the children in this country. Wow. And he referred to it, and there's great economic difficulty, other difficulties, as the traditional family falls apart. He compared it to what's going on. He's just thunderstruck by it. He compared it to a speciation, and it was a great deal of response to that. He backed away from it, but in a real sense, sociologically, and the economic background to that, which is going on, is a tremendously alienating development that is going on for some of our most vulnerable people within our society.
Well, some of the viewpoints that have been advanced by the mental health consumers is that not necessarily are consumers at fault for not making up to the standards or being up to speed to what the quote-unquote therapeutic community is advancing. But basically what we're feeling is that the therapeutic community techniques and ways of dealing with consumers is inadequate in order to deal with them as persons, to deal with them in terms of the issues that they've had in their life and the fact that they have had many, many successes, possibly, before they've actually had this nervous breakdown, before they had this issue that caused them to go into a hospital. Once in a hospital, all of the issues that make a person up and make a person humanized is taken away from them. Their clothes are stripped off. They're given cloth materials in some certain situations. They may be restrained physically. All kinds of things that are perhaps dehumanizing.
Shot through with Thorazine.
Exactly. And all kinds of things are done to them that are contrary to what you would expect from a human being. If you take a child, for example, and you want that child to be nurtured and to grow into a substantial human being, you're going to, just like a flower, you're going to water that flower. You're going to give that flower nutrients. You're going to help it grow. You're going to help it sustain itself through the winter times. Unfortunately, in this particular case, some human beings are discarded as useless and as somehow having negative attributes like criminality or dangerousness if they're homeless people on the streets. I don't understand this because I really believe that this is America and this is supposed to be a place of a melting pot, particularly New York City, is a melting pot of all kinds of cultures, all kinds of human beings that live in this society, and they should all be helped with their own individual foibles and needs and help to attain the whatever level they need to be productive citizens in the society.
Yeah, and they are not. And the most vulnerable people are not, as attributed to the fact by the mushrooming, exponential almost increase of these group homes, which is in many cases a stopgap measure to take care of a situation that's out of hand. I want to just plug a book, even though he's not here now. We're going to get him later, but let's both of us, because we've all sort of taken a look at it, and it's on the best-selling list now, or about to become. It's called 9 Highland Road. David, you're reading this book, too.
Yeah, I'm reading it right now.
And I'm reading it, too. It's a very sensitively written book by a fellow named Michael Weinrip, right? And he writes about the development and some of the personal developments that took place with the in the development of a group home out in Glen Cove, Long Island. And so might as well give him a plug because he's one who's beginning, a writer from the New York Times, who's beginning to address this sociological problem that is really very, very widespread and is going to be defining dimensions of the development of the society into the future. These things are growing so quickly now. You've got the two things. David, you're a biologist, and you took your degree in these kind of things. But these developments, you say even we have now 1,200,000 people locked up and incarcerated in our prisons. We have something on the order of, I read in the paper, something on the order of what they will call, and how they use these terms, schizophrenics. We're talking about maybe different groups, but you're dealing with the same problems here. They're vulnerable people. There may be 1 million or so, or Ray, you have figures on how many people are called mentally ill in the society or something. We're beginning to, and you, in a certain sense, these group homes with these youth represent a youth culture that is not part of the favored maybe 40% or whatever it is that are sons and daughters of doctors and lawyers and that, but that it's a growing youth culture, Generation X, whatever you want to call it. There's a youth culture that's growing and is being alienated in their relationship to the established society. There was a program on the other day that there's a real deep alienation between the boomers and the busters or whatever they want to call it. But we have some water that's boiling under a sociological condition in this country that doesn't seem to be addressed in the sort of way that you usually turn on the television set and look at all the good, the news that they give us. There's some real problems, don't you think? Or maybe from your generation, and you were just at that Woodstock thing, but maybe you could address some of the problems of the younger generation, right?
Well, I feel also about the population that I work with that they are also very disenfranchised. That there are severe problems facing teenagers growing up right now. They don't have a lot of positive stuff to look to. They don't have a lot of positive role models, positive examples to look at. There's a huge amount of what I call trickle-down violence that their heroes are gangsters. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about every kid that comes through here, but I'm talking about this sort of 12 to 17-year-old range. It's very popular right now to walk around like you have, you're part of a gang, or that to carry weapons gives people a sense of power, rather than understanding yourself and taking control over your own life,
or feeling you're being able to,
or feeling empowered to do what you want with your life and to understand what you want and to become a part of society rather than just push everything away.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You're out in the idyllic, bucolic, rural society. Yeah. I mean, you have guns and violence that's creeping in, is in the cities, almost endemic. Guns in school. Never heard of such a thing, But now you got, and it's even up in the bucolic countryside and so forth. That's beginning to happen. And don't those gangs that people join and they feel they need to, the young people, they give a sense of communitarian or a family identification that is lacking by what the traditional societal standards seem to be able to be about providing. And let's not put the blame all on the individual. It has to do with sociological and economic crumblings of our traditional society, which don't seem to be addressed by the leaders of the society, it would seem to me. I don't know. But go ahead.
I don't think they're addressed at all. And I think that a lot of criticism is given to kids growing up now, saying that they just aren't getting it. They just aren't taking control. It's their fault.
Yeah.
But if you look at it in a different way, they're doing a fantastic job of mimicking the governments and the institutionalized the institutions that are around. It's socially acceptable today to lie, cheat, and steal. Mm-hmm. It's all right.
I mean, the white collar people do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're learning pretty well to be players in with our same cultural mores, if you look at it that way. I don't think that they deserve the full onus of this.
Well, I think there may be an additional variable involved also, maybe one or two, which is economics. People, the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots being disfranchised from the society because they don't have the creature comforts, or don't have the this or that, or don't have the genes or the whatever, and therefore they have to put on this other additional air as if they're tough and they're part of a group, and that fear thing comes in. Because in some neighborhoods, it's essential that one become a part of a gang, or one becomes a part of a group that's going to be protective of you in a physical sense. And it's the same kind of issues that I dealt with when I worked with a group called, I don't know if you know, Big Brothers Incorporated, that dealt with children in the inner city. So sometimes we kind of forget that there is a whole difference between people who come home and they can lock their houses at night and everything is safe and calm, and they don't have to congregate as a group. And I'm not trying to say that that's okay, or that people should band together against other people, but I think fear is a very overwhelming kind of situation, and this sort of bravado of walking and talking tough and this, that, and the other in order to keep people back, because in actuality, I'm very afraid.
Yeah.
I'm very, very afraid of what might happen to me.
Yeah, increasingly that's it. And it's not only just in our urban inner cities and so forth, it's beginning to pop up all over, Oshkosh and all over the country. And, it calls into attention, too, also the fact that here we are going, and in a certain sense we can find, economically we can see that the rich are becoming very much more richer. 43% of all our gross of our capital assets are owned by the upper 1%. The poorer groups are getting poorer through time, despite all of the efforts. And if we write this in a systems way, as grand old Bucky Fuller might have wanted to have us do, and we begin to carry it out on into a world scale, we can see that the scales of justice are tipping ever more against the most vulnerable of the world and concentrating all power and capability to manipulate things in a fewer and fewer hands of super powerful elite who own the technological instruments of production that are increasingly responsible for production and for the economic realities of the world. We are living in a world that is precariously organizing, and the systems and the institutions, it's almost like a feudal structure, if I may suggest, where you have corporate courts with the people who own that, and then you have courtiers who will answer to those who own the assets that make up that corporation, and you have a level of dukes that get $200,000 a year, and then there's people under him and other people, but and then you have public sector fiefdoms where you have the same sort of thing. There's a little bit left over for entrepreneurs, but then as soon as they become first bit successful, they're bought up or bought out. So you're getting to where you have this concentration of power, and on a world scale, the GATT agreements are just about being signed, World Economic Organization is being proposed, NAFTA and so forth. The capital is going very easily around the world. So that the situation is there. And we have a reality, if we would call it a reality, to which human beings are asked to adjust, which in an increasing sense, it seems to me, in the words of Erich Fromm, who was a psychiatrist, the reality to which people are asked to adjust and find their identity in terms of is increasingly insane. Or you're not able to do it. The standards of the society are not standards by which the people are expected to be able to live, and there's no visionary leadership coming from our leadership, whether philosophically, economically, artistically, or anywhere, that proposes appropriate change so that the vulnerable, not only the most vulnerable need help, but there's increasing numbers of people who are going to be needing help as this system en masse begins to fall apart. Does that make any sense? And that you two are representing some of the most vulnerable groups, the young and the mentally disturbed, let's say, but they are a vanguard group of increasing numbers of the world society, national and world society, that are going to be in this debtorous position, as it were, an unseen debtorous. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I wonder if that rings true, or your sense of the world in which we live, that they allow species to die out en masse, and there's increasing numbers of people who are beginning to think, well, we can just allow the superfluous numbers of population to die out. It's becoming very, very difficult in terms of the reality. And again, back to the point that the world that they're asked to adjust to is not a sane world by which people in large number could get a sense of purposeful identity.
That's true. It seems like across the board, when you look at society now, the tendency is of those in power is to homogenize things and to make things very manageable, very predictable, and homogeneous. And as in biology, that's how you kill off a system. The complexity and letting each player in a system play its fully actualized role is how you have a strong and enduring system.
Well,
there
I
must
agree.
be some reason in biology for there being such a huge, 5 million types of bugs. If Darwin were correct, why would there are so many different kinds of species, and it seems to be evolution moves toward variety, and not towards just all concentration of power and attention upon one species or one small group within one species. There needs to be a sense of ecological inclusion and back into an integration into the whole of the system of which we are a part. As a biologist and a comprehensive one, you would sense that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of, what comes to mind is two books, basically. One called The Power Elite, which, as you alluded to before, of corporations grabbing hold of a huge and tremendous, inordinate amount of power and wealth. And another book called Socially Structured Inequality, in which the whole system is built upon the amassment of wealth and of personal power and status. And I think this kind of system has been going on for a long time, to the extent that whether we realize it or not, our power of the leaders of this country has really kind of eroded to that of becoming very close to an oligarchy.
Oh yeah, plutocracy. Yeah,
rather than a group of people who are ruling this country together. And unfortunately, I think there may be instances of other countries, perhaps, who are trying to do certain things. I'm not claiming, and I'm not one to claim that America should be in a different kind of system. Socialism, for example, is a system that I have not seen work except in very small groups or clusters of people. But I think that the heart has to be put back in America. I think the heart has to be put back in mental health. The heart has to be put back in group homes, in terms of letting people know that these are people that have strengths, abilities, intelligences, a whole fiber of self that people are kind of just disallowing and saying that these people are not useful to the society.
Yeah.
But one has to wonder whether or not is this in the interest of the society, because in order to have a capitalist system, and in order for people to amass wealth, there must be some people who are being exploited in order for that wealth to surface.
Yeah, well, yeah, it begins to get, also it's like if you have the analogy of a philharmonic orchestra, and you have everyone has to be playing in that orchestra. And again, evolution, biology again, or biophysics, seems to tell us that we have, in a systems way, all of the cells of the body have to be operating maximally or in synchronization. DNA will tell us this, that it's a design in nature and that we're part of a broader pattern. And that if you have just a few cells or a cell in runaway growth, such as we have allowed to increasingly seems to happen, that's what we call a cancer. A cancer is out of touch with the broader biological system of which it's a part, and that we have that. And, it's a problem. Now, we traditionally like to think that we are able to do it, I think you're quite right, the socialism in the sense of taking away private property probably wouldn't work, but we need something new. Socialism has different definitions. Some people just call it, Mortimer Adler just calls it movement towards social equality, or lessening of the number of people in difficult situation. But we are coming into a digitized world. We're coming into a world, I think we need some sort of a binary economic system, one that begins to bring into, spread some ownership of technology, which is increasingly responsible for production. It's entirely concentrated in very, very few hands. Most people relate only to gaining income by their job, and they must be sycophant within the structures that will give them that job. They are, in a certain sense, commodifying their time and their lives. They're turning themselves into a commodity in order to get wages, and then they must be sycophant to these large institutions. And it's a system of social control that probably won't work. But the downsizing and the technological replacement of people is something that is going to have to be facing. You're going to have a real problem. But to come, we need some sort of a new system. But to come back to this idea of that the reality to which people are asked to adapt or to become part of is in itself not sane, then one begins to say, the King of Hearts film was shown to say that the people who were insane or called insane were in fact perhaps sane. And the people the standards of sanity were not. I wonder, you understand what I'm saying, is that I wonder if there isn't the kernel of a dialectic, if that's the right term, or at least a challenge that would come out of, let's say, people who are supposedly insane, or let's just use that term, crazies, or whatever you want to call it. If there are people who do not adjust to that system, that there might be the beginnings of a critique of the system itself that would be effective, that could lead toward change. Could I read one thing, a poem, right? This is Emily Dickinson, God bless her, you know, and maybe it's a good place to put it in here. And it's an untitled poem, but it's an interesting one. I wonder what you maybe make of it, Ray, particularly, or David, you know, for that matter. It says, much madness is divinest sense to a discerning eye. Much sense the starkest madness. 'Tis the majority in this as all prevails. Assent, and you are sane. Demure, you're straightway dangerous and handled with a chain. I mean, I thought that poem of Emily Dickinson's, I'm happy to be able to put in there. But you understand what I'm saying in a certain sense. Annie DeFranco says we lock people up in prisons, or, you know, that sort of thing. But that there might be the basis of a dissent from the standards of the society himself, or a questioning of them appropriately, that might come out of the two groups that you represent. I don't know. I don't want to keep talking here, but do you understand what I'm saying? That Eric Fromm was perhaps more right. And if people who are thought of as being insane, the roster of people who are thought of as being insane, almost like in the gay movie, they begin to start coming out of the closet, in a certain sense, and declaring themselves, then you might begin to be able to build a counter force to the overwhelming power of the established system that would try to establish itself and its values upon a people which are not and cannot work. I
don't know that there's a lot to be gained by comparing oneself to insane, and because the crazy people who control this thing are going to have stratified levels of insanity to sanity. I think that basically what we have to do is compare ourselves to the best parts of the society and insist upon the best type of treatment for inpatient and outpatient, the best kind of treatment for all levels of the society, because this country has the properties that can make that possible.
Yeah.
And so one of the beautiful things that can happen out of all of this is that not only consumers, but also all people who are also consumers can really realize and get in touch with the power and the zest that is there, that they can take control of this situation and make it better, and rival the quote-unquote power elite.
Well, what I'm trying to say is it might be from these quarters, or Jesus would have seen it was from these quarters of the most oppressed, where the vision would come. To bring an alternative kind of pattern to it, you know, in a very real sense. Rather than them, I'm very happy to see that the notion of advocacy on the part of these oppressed peoples, as it were, in a sense, is beginning to be done by people who are perhaps in a little bit stronger position than some of those people are themselves. They would get strong. There should be more and more people becoming advocates of the dispossessed people that you two, in your own ways, are trying to do. We have a number of people from history and in the modern society. I mean, Abraham Lincoln, our greatest president, was a manic depressive. He was one of the people who was having difficulty. If you go back through Van Gogh, and you go back through the roster of people, Ted Turner now is, right? Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon. Buzz Aldrin had mental difficulties, real serious mental difficulties. He walked on the moon. Increasing numbers of people, particularly if you start getting into the realm of poets and artists and other kinds of things. Some of the very best human beings who have a sense of empathetic appreciation for their fellow human beings have difficulty, and who wouldn't have difficulty if you have any sensitivity in this unjust world that we live in?
Oh, yeah.
But do you understand what I'm saying?
Most definitely,
some a vanguard group.
Some of the most creative people that I think have ever lived, and also I can point to certain individuals in my facility at the present time. There are physicists, there are doctors.
Sure.
There are 2 lawyers that I work with presently who are consumers. This whole notion of a person that is sick or has had a psychiatric disability never being able to produce anymore, never being able to accomplish anything, never being able to contribute anything to society is an antiquated notion.
Absolutely.
People have to have the right to, if they have a disease or an illness, be able to go to a hospital or a caring place, have that situation corrected, and go right back to their positions if they're able to handle the job, and go and merge right back with the society.
And we have to be sensitive to the special kind of pain and suffering that is there, because there's a great deal of pain and suffering, and we have to be empathetic to that. But we also have to be empathetic to, or we have to be understanding as we begin to get toward the realms of people who are stronger. Let's use the word stronger in a personal sense and everything, to the fact to question the values that they are asked to be established as sanity. Sycophant kind of attitudes towards those who run this system and are heading it for the precipice is called sanity.
Well, I believe sanity
and that can't be allowed. There has to be some sort of an alternative that's going to be proposed. I would propose, and if it isn't going to come out of our youth and our alienated youth, and particularly some of the most downtrodden and youth, if they're going to just go along with things, or if it isn't going to come out of there, I'm not sure where it might come from. That's all. I don't know, David. Maybe you want to contribute, and I don't want to hear.
I think you're right that it's most likely going to come from some. It's got to come from a group that's outside of that central entity of the system, because they're the ones who have the opportunity to see. You can't see a system if you're within it.
Right, exactly.
So that's where.
That's interesting.
Sorry. Well, I agree with him because as one of the people within the system, they have a vested interest in continuing the status quo in terms of keeping the treatments going, keeping those clients coming for their 45-minute hours, making sure that they get payment for the. This is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a little kiddie show or whatnot. These people and most people in those situations don't really work that hard, as opposed to, for example, people that work in the clubhouse model. There's a generalist mode, they call it, where a person follows whatever the desires and dreams and aspirations of the individual person. So if a person comes to you and he's able to do computer work, you learn computer work and you deal with the person. If the person is able to do only maintenance work, then you help that person do maintenance work and feel good about the fact that they're working, that they have an essence in themselves that's positive, and help that person get where they need to go. To tell somebody, a clinician, that they do porter work, or they do some kind of hands-on kind of situation, or they, God forbid, talk to the individual, is something that is totally alien to that person's sense of self, sense of training. They have to have their office, they have to have their group meetings in order to feel important. To be normal, to tell their friends that, well, you know, I ran a group therapy session and I maintained so-and-so and so. You cannot talk a person back to health. You cannot do it. You have to put a person in an experiential kind of situation and allow that person's abilities and strengths to kind of maximize and get back to where they need to go with support and with positive input.
Right. And we need to support that kind of thing and try and do it. I think what I was trying, in a certain sense, I applaud you both for helping out some of the most, again, one of the most vulnerable people in a way, you know, that has to be done in a very immediate, practical sense, taking care of the needs that people have and so forth. But again, I can't help thinking that it might be that these are from where the leadership for an alternative vision of how our society is going to be organized might very well come from. These could be, you know, like the advocates for the, you know, the only sane response to an insane reality is, in a certain sense, what would be seen as insanity. You know, if you can say that we can have an appropriate world order, and they define, or you can have an order where people can be interdirected and be able to be doing things in terms of their own inner given sense of purpose and freedom, and or that we may live in a world which has sufficiency for all. We may have superseded scarcity as an epistemological reality in this universe, and you're proposing a reality, it would be as threatening to them as the Copernicus change was to the medieval power structure and so forth, but that it's from these people that the core of an alternative might come, if you can understand, particularly from some of the people who have had mental difficulties.
I think sanity...
There would be a certain poetic justice in that.
I think sanity is very simplistically what the majority of people do. In other words, most people go to school.
That's what Emily said.
Most people go to work. Most people eat. Most people, when someone deviates from that somewhat, then there's a difficulty. But here's the trick. Most people don't paint.
That's right.
Most people don't write poetry. Most people don't do all of these creative things, dance, all of these things that are quote-unquote outside the norms of normal society and in the creative realm of things. These are people that are quote-unquote a little weird.
Well, there's more of them when you think. I mean, there's a lot of people.
Oh,
and the best people.
There are a huge amount, and not to count the amount of people who give up on their art because they don't feel that they can make it in this commercial world.
It's like I was telling you, I had this vision the other day. Vincent van Gogh's out there painting irises, and somebody says, "Vincent, what are you doing? Wasting your time painting irises. Come to the warehouse. There's boxes to be moved." And that's called responsible behavior of moving this thing from here. And increasingly, the jobs that they're asked to do are surrogate robot functions that would be able to be performed. But there is no other way for people to get income other than to be within these behemoth organizations and being able to be outer directed, do what you're told, and tell others to do what they're to do. It's a bureaucratic model that, and not only is it not dehumanizing, as Eric Fromm pointed out, and others, but it's also becoming less effective. Downsizing is the order of the day. It's creeping into the middle classes. It's creeping into the middle classes increasingly. It isn't just in some group of inner city people or something. It's the middle classes where the technology is beginning to displace workers in the job sense, just as they did on the farm. And the farms are, do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, sure.
It's not working. There has to be some alternative system, and to allow for a world where people are freely able to be interdirected, to be fluently able to do what it is that they have an alternative system of income, so that they can do what it is they feel they want to do within a context of freedom, is something that is called insane and unattainable. We can't possibly have that, and won't work because it doesn't fit in with the traditionally inherited institutional structures. And those structures may have been superseded by our own technological success, and it's not realized at all, and it should be. And the only people who articulate it are people that they call lunatics, or people who are walking around on the moon, like Mr. Alden. But that may in fact be the case. The visionaries are telling us of a transformed world, and do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, sure.
And it might be those are the ones who could lead the charge, as it were, in a certain sense, to bring an alternative that appropriately could transform this world in the way that it desperately needs.
I do not allow the consumer off the hook. I do not allow the public, the regular Joe on the street off the hook, because they have to read. They have to look around. They have to talk. They have to investigate. They have to talk to other people about issues that are concerning. They cannot just accept things in the print. They cannot just accept things that they see. They have to weigh it with their own consciousness and so on and so forth. I think that a lot of times we take things for granted. If a president gets on TV and we take his word for granted in terms of mental illness or some other kind of issue,
you smile,
or some other kind of issue, in terms of mental health, are we supposed to just say no? Is that the appropriate response to make to somebody? No, they have to revise the system that's in place, because it's ineffective.
Yeah,
for
but
one
for
thing.
you, Ray, or David, or you to say they have to revise the system is insane by their standards. You have to adjust to their system, is what they say. Now, I don't know, David, how about you, generationally? What do you think? What is the attitude of young people toward the system that they see? And what is the general? Is there overworked angst? Is there a sense of the end of the world is coming? They're carrying guns around. What is the sense of some of these most vulnerable young people that you see and you deal with?
There's definitely a sense, there's no sense of future, of distant future. I often ask kids where I work, I say, what positive traits do you think might emerge in humanity over the next 500 years? And they look at me like I'm completely insane, that they're, to even think about 500 years, they don't think people are going to be around.
Yeah.
And that's across, that's been the answer that I've gotten from just about every person at this, where I work, that I've asked.
That's the reality they walk around with, or if it were to be projected 50 years.
50 years, I haven't asked that one.
Yeah, well, no, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
there isn't a sense that there's a world of opportunities and things that they can go and grow into, and that the system provides a way in for them, you know? Like Mr.
There's definitely not that.
Get your education and go, and you'll be able to find your way in. I mean, it probably works for, what, 40, 50% maybe? 30, 40% of the, you know, people in the society, but in increasing numbers it doesn't. But you find that sense?
Definitely. And also what you were saying about people not investigating, not turning over stones and reading between the lines and doing all that. They're trained, kids growing up now are trained not to do that. They're not given the skills to do that. It would be unwise, in a survival sense, for the people who are running the show right now to train people to do that, because it would disrupt their place. So whether it's conscious or not, just the resonance of this system right now is making it so that kids coming up today are taught to be entertained and not necessarily to make decisions. I'm fortunate to work. I'm very fortunate to work for an agency that practices non-judgmental and non-directive counseling. In other words, we don't tell kids what to do. We try to help them figure out what it is they want to do and what they think they need to do.
Yeah, I'm sure that's where you
take responsibility
be. Yeah, right.
for their own decisions and start to get a sense of, hey, what I do affects my future.
Yeah.
And I don't have to just take directives from other people. I don't have to be led around by these cues that are out there. I make the cues. And I think that needs to happen.
That's a very subversive thing to be doing, putting into people's minds these days. Yeah, right.
Well, I kind of believe that, again, that we do have to train ourselves. We do have to identify which issues really are important to us. We cannot absolve responsibility for our lives to somebody else. I think that we've programmed ourselves or allowed ourselves to be programmed by the boob tube, so to speak. And I think there's wonderful programming out there. There's some wonderful pictures out there. But I think that even in a very small sense, sometimes I've dated people, for example, who are kind of waiting for that violin music as you kind of come through the, you know, people don't realize that TV is a reflection of life, not the other way around. And that therefore people have to really grab the moment, really have to seize the moment, be in the moment, and really, really kind of realize that the only way that you can be free and realize what your full potential is to live every moment for today, to talk with you and talk with you and talk to whomever you want to, and not to take things for face value, and realize that you do have power collectively, and you do have power individually. This amazing amount of power that one individual can harness and project on a situation.
All well and good, Ray. That's very, very good, and it's nice that you got all these kind of self-help things and everything where you. And I think if I ever hear one more time somebody feels good about themselves, I'm going to throw over because I mean that's good. You know, feel good about yourself, and you can stand, and you know that's all well and good, and you can do that, and you can. But that also can be a way of copping out by just going internally conscious. I think everything is a conscious, you know, your own consciousness is all that matters. It does have an effect, but you're part of a broader organism, you're part of a broader system, and you really have to have some consciousness of that broader context as well. I mean, you know, despite you can do positive thinking as much as you want, but when the Titanic goes down, you go down.
But you have to think positive. You have to gain that awareness before you can really enter to that larger mix. You have to tune your own instrument. Or simultaneously with becoming a part of that larger mix.
Yeah, if you're able to.
It's not. I think copping. People can choose to cop out if they gain awareness, but that's
I think it's really kind of important to your observation, what you're saying, that if you just kind of go out there and paint a holier than thou or a beautiful picture, not much is going to be accomplished. You're very right, and I'm really glad that you kind of brought that back home to me, because advocacy basically at this point is an issue, is an organization that's part of Fountain House that is action oriented.
Right.
I go to meetings all the time, and people say, "Oh, Ray, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Are you coming back to the next meeting?" I don't know, because I'm not going to meet to have another meeting, to have another meeting, to have another meeting, to create a study, to decide about what the hell we're going to do the next time. I said, listen, I'm going to come to this meeting. I'm going to come to the next meeting, and after that, if there's no action about to evolve, I got something else to do.
That's right, and that's one way of co-opting energy and so forth, that sort of thing. But again, I cannot help feeling, and it's just something that's happening. Advocacy in the name of, or let's say, led by, let's say, the image of the King of Hearts, where the people come out of what they call it the lunatic asylum, and they watch the sane people line up the armies and kill each other from the balcony while they did things that were thoughtfully insane, artistically and so forth, is one that I can't help escaping me. But that the alternative might be able to be led by advocates of and of these people themselves, and more people join in the sense of saying, yes, in terms of the sanity standards that are set by this society, I am not saying we have alternative standards that are being set for this society which do resonate to real human needs. And I can't help thinking, I don't know, you got the gay movement, you've got the socialist movement, you got the Marxists, you got this and that, but the idea of a advocacy group and more prominent people, Ralph Nader and other people coming in the name of consumerism, and other people who could begin to start advocating for and out of that nexus of society, seems to me, and involving these expanding group home kids that are so vulnerable, and grooming those kind of people, and pick up on some of those Woodstock kids who are looking for vision. There's no vision of a society that is really, meaningful. It's not just a party that you're involved in. You're involved in a broader evolution of events.
There isn't even a call for vision. I think you guys could be on the cutting edge of establishing a real appropriate challenge to the society, is what I'm saying. We only have a couple minutes left, or a minute left. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Dave. I was just saying that there isn't really even much of a call for vision. Nobody's encouraging people to develop vision. No one's, there isn't any. The vision isn't even being discussed.
It isn't being discussed among these young people you deal with, or in general.
In general, I think.
Or in general, right? Well, that's
both.
that's one of the great lackings that
probably more so in the population that I'm dealing with, since these are the adults of tomorrow, and they seem to be getting hit harder with this sort of insulated, entertainment-based thought pattern.
Well, then that might call it in. We were including, you can include Vincent Van Gogh and all the people, the roster of people that have had these problems, Abraham Lincoln. And if we were to go back and to do that, there's more than you think. The great artists of the past that have been involved in it. But if we were to go back to the really important people in the history of the human society, they almost certainly all would have been called, let's use the word, crazy, wacko, insane at the time. Jesus, Mohammed, Lao Tzu, Galileo, if you want to get into the scientific. I was thinking of the spiritual leaders in their time were certainly called crazy in their time, and the leaders of the way that might be able to bring transformation to this world are very likely to be in the van of that. But I can't help thinking and wishing you both well as you begin to perhaps do the formation and advocate for a movement that can bring some appropriate and healing transformation to this interrelated system, spaceship Earth, which is direly in need of it now if we're not to go over the precipice of species-wide suicide. I congratulate you both on your activity and the work you're doing toward trying to bring a liberated condition to the world. But we run out of time. We always run out of time at the end of these things. There's never enough time. But Ray, pleasure.
Thank you.
My son,
thank you,
literally, it's a great pleasure. And I would remind you in the